Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of the podcast. We normally are on Tuesdays, but today, being the 10th anniversary of Raspberry Pi, we are having a special broadcast with very special guests, Eben Upton and Pete Lomas, founders of Raspberry Pi. Where, as always, we're taking your questions live, and uh, we only have, and because it's Celebration Day, Eben only has a few minutes, only has 10 minutes. So we will cut to the chase here. Please ask your questions.
Ask me questions quickly. I will do speed.
Les, ask a question.
We'll go back to the history of the Pi. So, back in the midst of time, you were director of studies computer science at St John's College. I've done my research. I read a book.
Ooh, good man.
So you noticed there was a problem with the entrance coming through in 2004. What was the problem, and why did that become the genesis of the Pi?
We didn't have enough of them. So all of our applicants have gone away. We used to have lots, then we didn't have lots, then we had very few. And we asked ourselves why. And the idea we came up with was that the 8-bit computers of the 1980s had given us our applicants in my era, which was the mid-90s. They went away, and a few years later, our applicants went away. And so the question was, if we made a thing, and the evolution of the thing was from something I could just about put together with a soldering iron to something that required an actual engineer like Pete to design. We thought if we made a cool thing, a thing that was programmable and fun and cheap and robust, perhaps our students would come back.
Awesome. So the original model was just like a big thing on perf board, wasn't it?
Yeah, right. Okay, and that's I'm a software engineer and a chip engineer. And there's a sort of missing bit in the middle between those two, which is the actual electronics level engineering. Because of course, chip engineering sounds like it must involve electronics, but in practice, like software engineering, it involves sitting in a room and typing things at a keyboard, and then after a while, you finish typing things on the keyboard, and people think very hard, screw their courage to the sticking post, spend $1 million on a tape out, wait 3 months or 6 months at the moment, and then you find out whether the thing is a working chip at the end of it. But there is a missing piece there between that, all of the typing you do at the start to design the chip and the typing you do at the end when you're writing software on the platform you build. There's a piece of, no matter how hard we try, we've never been able to get rid of the real physical world. And that's the bit that I know virtually I knew nothing about, I still know comparatively little about. And that's where Pete came in this project.
Yeah, it was really weird. I mean, I think it was such a chance, wasn't it? That I think it was 2008. I mean, don't forget, Pi was around in our minds long before it was launched, and we had a few missteps or false starts and swear words and things when somebody turned up with a chip that wasn't square, which I've got here, which was a BCM 2727. Folks, it's impossible to see the actual array of BGA balls on the bottom because they're so small, aren't they, Eben? Anyway, we tried that.
0.4 mil BGAs have caused us all sorts of unhappiness over the years.
It has. I mean, but basically, so I met Alan Mycroft in 2008 just at a conference in London, and we just got talking. And and we just happened to wander onto the subject, and I don't really know how. I thought, what a cool idea. I could actually have some of those, and I could give them to potential engineers at my company and say, go do something useful with that. Come back with something interfaced on it in a week, and if you've done something decent, I'll employ you, So anyway, so we had a meeting, didn't we? It was, I don't know, was it early October? 2008?
2008, towards the end
2008, and we sat in a room and we said, okay, are we going to do this? This is the first time I'd met Eben, and Eben said, yeah, we'll do this. And I said, yeah, we'll do this. And we went off and did it. It just took a while.
And of course, at that point, the thing we were talking about building was nothing like the Raspberry Pi that you know.
Absolutely not.
That chip that Pete's holding up has no ARM core in it. It has no ARM processor. It can't run Linux. And therefore, you have to write your own software. Well, we would have had to have written the operating software for it ourselves entirely from scratch. And there is a lost operating system for it, which is basically a port of CPython to the 2727, to the DSPs that are inside 2727. And it would boot to a command prompt Python command prompt. But this was, the genesis of the idea that we would have to put an ARM into the platform was realizing how much software work a very small team of people was going to have to do in order to turn that kind of closed world into something that other people could build on top of.
And then miraculously, I don't know how it happened, 2835 appeared. I mean, how did that happen?
It's weird, right? Somehow a chip with an ARM processor emerged from the design team that I was involved in. It was very, very strange.
It's so curious.
It's so curious. I can't imagine how it can have happened.
No, and very conveniently had all the RAM on the top. So a lot of the wires on the board disappeared.
Yeah. So, there was a lot of, serendipity, manufactured serendipity in getting from the 2727 based design that Pete and I first talked about, to the board that we demoed to Rory, and then to the alpha boards that Broadcom built for us, and then to the beta board,
and then
to
this.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a story here, Eben, isn't there, with the slightly extended SD card holder.
It's the birth of our hatred of end of life, isn't it? That we don't want people.
Absolutely.
And between Pete designing the board and us making the first prototypes in Cheshire, they EOL'd the SD card connector, and so all you could buy, there was a short SD card connector that you'll be familiar with. The short SD card connector you'll be familiar with. There we are. They EOL'd it, and I think they put the mold in the skip. They put the mold in the skip, and I think we persuaded them, or our contract manufacturer, or RS or Farnell or someone, persuaded them to take it out of the skip and make it again. But for that brief window, the only thing we could find were those
that would actually fit on. But it got us past. It got us past the prototype. So this is Pi 0 or Pi 1, very first one off the production line, which I'll now go put back in the safe now.
And it works, right?
Oh, it goes so far. I think it does. Yeah. I mean, we should get it back out and give it a good whiz, but I'm sure it still works, and it probably still works with the latest Reva software as well.
Oh yeah, well that's always I tried. Yes, it will, because I tried it. So you can run the Bullseye release on one of those, and it will work.
Yep.
So I've got a question for you guys. Today being the 10th anniversary, as you both said, ideas for the Raspberry Pi go back way more than a decade. When was the first time you found a Raspberry Pi in the wild, unexpectedly, maybe in a store or somewhere?
Ooh.
They started showing up behind panels, flat panels, turning televisions into smart televisions, or into monitors or status displays very quickly. I remember walking, this wasn't the earliest time, but I remember walking into the CNN newsroom in London, probably a couple of years into the program, and all of the screens it must have been after 2014, because it had Simon Long's the grey desktop background with the big logo in the middle. And all of the displays there had Raspberry Pi logos on them. And I thought, oh, wow, that's nice of them to set them up like that. And of course, it wasn't that at all. They all just ran Raspbian. Just everything in the CNN studio ran Raspbian. That was quite cool.
Yeah, it was about the same time. I think I took an early 3D printer apart and found a Raspberry Pi lurking in the bottom as a controller.
One thing you did see a lot of was the 26-pin connector. Pete's 26-pin connector became an ad hoc, kind of a de facto standard for a while. So as I remember seeing Newell, what they called the people who became NB-IoT, developed radio that became NB-IoT. They did a dev kit and it had a 26-pin connector on it. I was like, is that 26-pin connector? And they're like, yeah, that's for plugging a Raspberry Pi into.
Yeah.
It's not my cat. This is not my house. This is not my cat, but it is a nice cat.
Well, I know Eben has to go in a second. We have a user question that I bet he can answer very quickly, which is very current, which is when can we expect supply of Raspberry Pi 4B to be back to normal? Right now it's it's expensive, I guess.
When do we expect to be back to normal? I'm stopping answering this question because it's making fools of us all, right? What's going on? We're making about 500,000 Raspberry Pis a month. They go in. We have a big backlog of we think a credible backlog of 1 to 2 million units, and that backlog eats everything that we can make. Now, some of that backlog is with resellers, and therefore resellers get Raspberry Pis and they sell them to people. There are two sorts of resellers. I said this to Gareth Hoffrey earlier today. There are two sorts of resellers in the world. There are some who operate their own pre-order system, and there are some that don't. So the trick is find one that does and place a pre-order, and they should be able to tell you how long you'll be in the queue for, because we do give them good visibility of when they're going to get units. Or find one that doesn't and watch them very carefully. And they'll get units. And so there is currently RPi Locator, which I've become slightly obsessed with, tells me that does not have any Raspberry Pi 4s available, but it has done quite regularly over the last few days. Had Raspberry Pi 4s come available at various resellers, keep an eye on them, you'll be able to buy one. But when do I think? Well, it'll finish when the global semiconductor shortage finishes. I think the challenge at the moment is trying to predict that moment is making fools of us all. And so I'm going to stop trying to predict it.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah, it's hugely difficult. I mean, it's a challenge. It's a worldwide, global challenge at the moment, and it's hard. It's hard for Raspberry Pi because we drove to a price point, even early days, didn't we, Eben? When we were trying to shave cents off the BOM just so we could get it to a point where we could actually launch it.
Yeah, it's.
But you did keep the GPIO connector on there.
I did. I didn't defeature it, even though I thought nobody would ever use it.
Yeah, you did.
That you knew what you were talking about. So
you threatened to defeature. I think you had a last-minute change of heart, didn't you?
I did, but I did take it off to 0. There you are. I got my revenge sooner or later. So.
Yeah, and then got everybody to complain about how hard it was to solder it back on.
It's a good soldering lesson for folks.
I
know you only wanted to give us 10. You only could give us 10 minutes, so I wanted to thank you, Evan, so much
Evan.
for joining us and for everything you do.
1 second. Wait, before you go, Eben, I've got something for you.
I'll
make this really quick.
Fire, are you? Please don't.
Hang on a second.
Just a light bit of welding.
Yeah. Last minute solder. Yes. On behalf of the Pi community, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. How are we going to blow them out from here?
Go ahead and try. Let's see what happens.
3, 2, 1.
Hey, it worked somehow.
Yeah, perfect. It's a miracle.
Community and family. There you are. Well, thank you again, and to everyone who's watching, thanks for 10 amazing years. We'll be around for at least 10 more.
Great.
Yeah, cheers, Evan.
Thanks, Evan.
All right, we'll see you soon.
Of course, it segues quite nicely into the fact that Pi shortages haven't exactly been a feature, except of course on launch.
Yeah.
When we, I mean, what probably people don't realise, as Evan said, this was a little country bumpkin project to be at Cambridge University. We're only going to make 3,000. And I said to Eben, look, if you only want 3,000 over like 3 or 4 years, I'll make them for you, no problem. In fact, you just give me the bits. I'll just slide them through my production line while nobody's looking, And then we foolishly had. I mean, it's not like Kickstarters. We sort of had we said we're going to have everything ready, so we had the prototypes the day before Christmas, and basically. We thought, right, time to go. So let's ask who might like a Raspberry Pi. And we placed an order, I think, for 10,000. And over 200,000 people put the hand up. And we went, oh, right, okay. Which is in one way, it's a lovely problem to have. Because everybody wants the thing that you've designed and you sweated blood over for the last umpteen years.
Yeah.
But then you've got the problem of where are we going to get 200,000? That's about $5 million worth of inventory. And at that time, you've got to remember there was like 7 of us. We had no office, no mobile phone, no secretary, no nothing that actually belonged to the Pi, to the Pi charity as it was. And everybody dibbed in and we made the first 10,000. Then we actually ended up giving those to Farnell and RS to sell on launch day. Les, you probably remember launch day. Do you?
Yep, that's where I got this.
Yeah. So yeah, it basically it was 6 o'clock start. I think 4 minutes past 6 they'd sold out. 6 minutes past 6, both websites had crashed and burnt.
Yeah.
7:30, I was getting unreasonable phone calls off my staff saying, "You've broken the Farnell and RS websites. Oh, and PS, your website's broken as well," because everybody's asking you why the other two websites are broken. Anyway, after a bit of doodling around, I think by about 9 o'clock, they got a static web page up saying, "Do you want to buy a Raspberry Pi? If so, click here. If you actually just want to do normal business that we do, please click here." And they forked the two websites, and that got us out of it. But even then, on that day, I think we took back orders for like 10,000, and of course, by the end of a year, we'd made $1 million. And of course, now it's astronomical at I don't know where we are. Is it I should have asked Eben before he left.
Yeah, that was a question I meant
I think it's something like about 39.9999 million.
In the blog post today on raspberrypi.com, it was 45 million.
Oh my God. I must have slept for 30 seconds.
So how does that stack? At one point last year, Raspberry Pi, I think, was touted as being, if you count all the models together, which may or may not be fair, as being the third most popular computer of all time, behind, I think, some others like the Commodore 64 or like the Apple II. I wonder where it stacks up now, because that was last year. So
I think it's going to be hard to catch them, isn't it? But I think we're on the way.
I mean, if you count all Raspberry Pis as a whole, then absolutely we'll catch them, because nobody's buying Commodore 64s anymore.
Well,
or maybe less is. I don't know.
Well, it's hard to get just one Pi.
Yeah. Also, I'll return to the question, and I will ask this of the audience too, if anyone wants to chime in and chat. How many Raspberry Pi boards do you have? Pete, I'm curious. Do you have any idea how many Raspberry Pi boards you have right now?
Well, no, I mean, but just as a rough idea, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got 5 on my desk just at the moment, right? But these are all ones I've picked up for today. I've probably got a couple of hundred floating around. I've lent out probably another couple of hundred, which I sort of know where they are, but haven't necessarily got back. I mean, I've got this unit we built for one of the Raspberry Pi. I'll get this right in a minute. For one of the Raspberry Pi jams, which was like a button box for answering questions. That's got a Raspberry Pi in it. And so we could join up all the Raspberry jams and have a bit of a Pi competition. That was good fun. This one is actually the precursor to the B+. So, as people may or may not know, I did all the design work for Pi in my spare time, but we were getting so successful, we just needed a full-time design team. So, as much as it pained me, I actually gave the Pi, I used to call my Pi baby, over to James Adams. And I mean, let's face it, he's done a brilliant job. And he's actually grown the product and done some fantastic work to get us where we are. And then with the rest of the team to create the silicon, have got us all the way through to where we are now with the Pi 4. And I guess eventually with the Pi 5. But the other thing that's curious, of course, is the Pico sort of takes us right round to the back of where it started, with a little board that will run native Python. Exactly. But I mean, Les, it goes sort of even before that, because that was the original concept.
Yeah.
And
that was, and Eben had actually coded that in the GPU of the 2727.
Is everyone here familiar with the new what do we call it? Lady Ada was talking about this recently. the new OS where you can just boot directly to CircuitPython prompts from a regular Raspberry Pi. What is that? What is that called?
It's bare metal CircuitPython, isn't it?
Right. I forgot the name. Is it just CircuitPython for? It's not just CircuitPython for Pi, but yes, so now you can effectively do that.
Yeah.
Which is
and there are a lot of cases where it actually is quite useful to be able to do that. So again, I think we've broadened and we've become full circle. We've gone industrial, but I mean, still for me anyway, it's still been the kids. And we were talking about it today on Twitter. Somebody was saying that, the first hello world is getting that LED to light, and then to get it to flash, in Morse code, or make it like a lighthouse, and then they potentially turn into designer of the next gigabit fiber or something. It just gets that curiosity going, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, it's the blinking LEDs, like the gateway to do anything with electronics.
Yeah,
it gets your interest. Yeah, you get that going, you can do a motor with a similar principle. You can do that, 2 motors, you've got a robot.
Couple of sensors.
Yeah,
you've got a robot that might be able to find its way around a course. In my case,
if I've made it, but yeah.
Yeah, I could show you my robot, but unfortunately, I'll end up ripping my earbuds out if I try and move. So that's probably not a plan. Right. No, actually, no. I'll tell you what. I'll just take them out and go grab it. So this gives you the idea of the sort of mess you can make.
Nice.
You can see the sensors on the sides.
That's the very back. Nice.
And the rather neat wiring on the top. But I mean, the point is, the kids can just put that together simply by starting from a basic design.
True.
And we had great fun with that, actually trying to write the software to make it follow a line in that case. Because, sorry, I didn't show you that underneath it had line following kit as well.
Nice.
And we had great fun discussing how you could tell which way it had gone off the line so you could turn the right way without having to guess. But the point is that I love it because what it does is it changes the whole concept of learning. Instead of trying to push stuff down the kids' throats, they're all going, oh, how do I do this? How do I do that? I want to do this. How do we do this? How can we? I want to make this. And you're going, oh my God. Right, yes, okay. Well, if you want to do that, let's look at this and try that and try that. If you want to do this, let's try that. And it's why it probably doesn't work in a regular education session. I mean, the teacher would just be bombed out. But I mean, at Raspberry Jams and things like that, there's enough people there, a community to support the kids. And, we don't quite outweigh the kids 2 to 1, but there's enough to keep the kids going and giving them encouragement, pointing them in the right direction, and generally, building their confidence that they can go it alone. I mean, I always talk about it as being it's a journey, and it's a journey on a rather, I would say, wobbly road, and it's got ups and downs. It's got really steep bits and it's got coasting down bits. And when the kids get to this really steep bit, that's the point where they could potentially give up. Yeah. But if there's people there just to nudge them up that and help them up that steep bit, they'll fly down the rest of it and get to where they want to go, which is great. So, I mean, I think even from the early years of the Raspberry, the Raspberry Jams, and then all through Pi Academy, teaching teachers how to teach kids about digital making.
Yeah,
it's been a fantastic journey.
Yeah, no question about it. And apparently, someone is now using a 2040 on a printer and a 3D printer main board.
Oh, brilliant!
So that's,
I mean, that'd be perfect for that.
That's pretty cool. It's
so are we getting any inbound questions there?
Yeah. Well, more comments and questions. So someone says they got Windows 98 SE to run on a 502.
Yeah.
They're still waiting for it to boot. Yeah.
So this is a very famous engineering question indeed. Yeah, just because you can doesn't mean you should, I think is the...
Yeah, well, listen, I often tell folks it's about trying to do something whether or not it's a good idea. And I also always tell my writers that we're in the business of interesting, not necessarily the business of good. So, there's lots of things that are fun to try just to technically achieve them. Sort of like,
just because you shouldn't doesn't mean you can't.
And some people just like to do
Yeah.
stuff because they can. Like this past weekend, for example, my 9-year-old became obsessed with the idea that he wants to play regular Minecraft on a Raspberry Pi, not the Education Edition,
Right.
which comes free, but regular Minecraft Java Edition.
The proper one, as my son would say. Yeah.
The proper one, yeah. So we installed it on here, and actually, we installed it on this Raspberry Pi 400, which I guess is blurring here. We installed it on this Raspberry Pi 400, but and it runs okay. Although I bet there's ways to get it run better, because he was getting like 9 or 10 frames per second. And I said to him, "Why do you could just play this on your laptop? Why do you want to play it on here?" He's like, "Oh, because I'm playing it on Raspberry Pi." So
there we go.
So there's just always people doing things because it's a challenge, and Les put Windows 10 on a. Have we tried Windows 11 yet?
I've done 10 and 11.
We did 11, right? Did Windows 10 and 11 on Raspberry Pi, which right now I would not recommend as a use case, but it's not everything in life has to be practical. You try things to see if you can do them, and this has been a great fun for things that are very practical and for things that are more of a learning experience.
It's very much like when we have the conversation with the kids. I mean, the thing that annoys me more is when somebody will turn around to the kids and say, "Oh, that's impossible." And that's, absolutely hate that. I mean, no, it might be really, really, really difficult because we don't understand the science behind it. But at some point, we will understand the science behind it. And then it's up to us makers and engineers to actually figure out how to make something useful out of it. Or maybe we'll just do something frivolous. I do love Maker Faire for that. I mean, although I do actually worry sometimes. I have to look over my shoulder, because I think I nearly got run over by a cupcake in the last Maker Faire. Yeah. If anyone's been to Maker Faire, you'll know what I'm talking about. These two guys that drive around in these motorized cupcakes that are about 4.5 feet in diameter. Completely lethal. But you just do see some fantastic stuff there.
So. So here's a question.
We go. Here's something.
When will the Pi come with an additional connection for a larger removable I don't know what Martin means, but SD card or SD
that might be a solid
drive?
state SS. That might have meant SSD. I don't know. Well, yeah. Well, it's a good question.
There's sort of.
I'm really fortunate, right? I'm really fortunate. I'm not in the core design team now, so I can't answer that question for them. But I would say that if I was in their shoes, I'd be looking at just simply at the use case and cost model.
Yeah.
How many people are going to use it? By how much is it going to cost to put it there?
I think Les can answer this a little bit because Martin, because there's a lot of third-party solutions to do this. You can either use a USB to SSD. Adapter, or I think there's a carrier board for the CM4 that will directly give you PCIe, right? Or SATA.
There is, and I'm going to just show this now because it's Timon who created it, Pioneera, and it's a CM4 Arduino Uno layout board, and on the underside is a SATA NVMe slot, so you can put in a hard drive, and I've got a hard drive in mine on my desk somewhere. Runs perfectly, and it runs lightning fast as well. And Timon saying thank you for the blinking LED. He got his curiosity going 10 years ago. He started with a Pi and an Arduino, and now he's selling his carrier boards on Mouser. Well done, mate.
Brilliant. Excellent.
But yeah, you can get carrier boards to it, or you can just plug in directly into the USB slot with an adapter. In fact, I've got a piece of kit here. It's slightly big, so bear with me. This is something I'm reviewing at the moment. It's probably going to be horribly out of focus. This is Argon's Eon NAS, and it uses standard hard drives, slightly blurry. And all it does on the back, you've got a carrier board. Come on, focus. There we go. It's got a carrier board that plugs in USB on the Pi, and you can plug in 4 SATA SSDs or 2 3.5-inch drives, and you've got yourself a NAS powered by a Raspberry Pi. Admittedly, it's a Pi 4, so you've got to use something as beefy as this. But it's fantastic where we've come from in 10 years, from just having a little hobbyist computer with 256 meg of RAM. This is 256 on this one with 700 megahertz single core CPU. It's also upside down. There you go. And
Glad you noticed, Les.
just because I saw the logo. Forget how to hold these ones, Pete. I've not used these ones for so long. I dug this one out of my box of bits to do a story over the weekend. And it was an interesting experiment, because now we're so used to quad-core CPUs and loads of RAM. To use the original Pi, it feels just a bit slow. Sorry, Pete.
You've been very complimentary about it being only a bit slow. I mean, I fired one up last week, and it's interminably slow now.
I was being British, Pete.
I know, of course you were. Very British problem.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the interesting thing is, right, Les, you could see that. I mean, just tucked on the side there, what actually, so that's the real-time clock for a Pi.
Yeah.
So that this was the whole concept. I mean, it comes back to the question of when are we going to do this and when are we going to do that? When we actually did the original Pi, we had an enormous list of things. I mean, if you put 4 engineers in a room and asked them to make a list of things they'd like on the Raspberry Pi, you know, before you know it, the list is a couple of pages long. Yeah. And it ended up being my job with Eben to actually hack all those ideas down to the ones that we absolutely needed. And, you know, there is a long discourse on how we got there. And the real-time clock was knocked out simply because you could make this. So if you wanted the real-time clock and didn't want to get it off the internet, you can just plug it onto your Pi and away you go. And now there's a more developed version, which they call a shim, which will actually go in between 2 boards. But the whole idea of Pi was that if not everybody wants it and it's not mainstream, then it gets left off. But we put the camera connector on because we knew that cameras were going to be important to the options that people would have in designing the fun things that they would do. I mean, in Pi Academy, you'll know, Les, we used hundreds of cameras. I mean, and now, of course, with the machine learning and recognition and all that, it's got super sophisticated. But we were able to bring out that low-cost camera really quickly after the Pi. So if you want one, you just plugged it in. But if we hadn't put the connector on the board, you could never have done that because, you know, it's a high-speed interface. It would have been in the just too difficult bracket. So we thought about everything we did on the basis of, well, if we don't do it on the Pi, can somebody do it some other way? And the other thing I found brilliant is the community have been fantastic at improvising ways of getting things connected.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're at a place now where now that we're at least at USB 3 and you have the ability to, with the CM4, add all these carrier boards. I feel like the connectivity is really, really good now. Is in a really good place. So, you know, I'm sure everybody's got their list of things they would want to see from the Pi, from the next Pi. I'm pretty happy. I feel like there's a really big leap between 3 and 4 in terms of performance and connectivity. Now that you have USB 3 and you have the dual video outs, so 4K support. The main thing I would want to see is just a slightly better performance for video for things like YouTube playback and stuff like that, which continue to be a little bit, some can stutter at times. But I mean, otherwise, I feel like you're in a really good place, even for things that the Pi doesn't necessarily have the performance to do. There are add-ons, right? Because there's even add-on machine learning boards that you can get that will add more capability there, like the Google Coral.
Yeah.
So
That's
it's
right.
all possible.
Yeah, but I still think that the great thing is that even if we're now on Pi 4, you can still connect it up with these. So you can still do blinking LED on a Pi 4. And as Eben said earlier, we haven't lost the software compatibility right back to day zero. So if all you could afford and all you've ever been able to afford is the Pi Classic, as it's called now, then you can still run it. And that's great. And I think that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
But there is going to become a point. I can smell it in the wind. There has to become a point where things are going to have to change, because we've run for 10 years on the same platform, on the same shaped board that was designed. Well, how big should we make this damn thing? Well, I know. Let's make it a size of a credit card. And we also didn't realize that that's also exactly the same size as a Lego tile. And then we wondered, well, how did the Lego tile to get to be that size? Well, you could imagine the boardroom at Lego going, how big should we make these tiles? I know, we'll make them as big as a credit card. Or was it the other way around? I don't know, but it was just fortuitous. and then it was designed that there was never going to be a case. And yet within, I think, months of getting hold of it, a Girl Scout at one of the, I think it was in Shropshire, Bereton Scouts, came up with the fact that she could build a Raspberry Pi case out of Lego.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's been great. And eventually we capitulated and put mounting holes on. But that was only really to allow us to support the bigger hats. So, but it's been a fantastic journey, and I think it's been a fantastic journey more so for all the people that have contributed, and all the community and all the teachers and everything. That's really made it fun. I remember many of those times up in Blackpool, Les, with all those kids, and they were having a whale of a time.
Yeah, the 20 kids in that little room in the library, all hacking away on Minecraft and all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And young Joshua Lowe sat in the corner, and his first project was an OS simulator in Scratch. And he could control the webcam in Scratch and make sprites come up on screen. It's like, okay, and you're 10 years old. This is getting very scary.
Yeah, it really unleashes the imagination and the power of kids. It has for my son. My daughter is just starting to learn. She's just turned 3, so she just picks this up or whatever, or picks this up or picks one of these up and says, "What is it?" And I say, "Raspberry Pi," and she says, "Raspberry Pi." So she'll probably be programming it. She'll probably be programming in Scratch next week and Python in 2 weeks. Anyway, I want to thank Pete and Eben and everyone who tuned in for this very special broadcast. This is such a great day. It's just wonderful talking with you, and we will be back at our regular time next Tuesday, the 8th. At 7:30 p.m. UK time, 2:30 p.m. US Eastern time. And we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.
Bye.